So I don't know about you, but I remember a few years ago, like eating vegan food was like a really big thing. Like every supermarket you go to, they're bringing out like new vegan burgers, like vegan chicken, stuff like that. And it was really on the up, and it was quite fashionable to eat vegan foods. And a lot of the science at the time was saying, oh yeah, meat's really bad for you, just eat lots of vegan food and you'll be healthy. You know, McDonald's brought out a vegan burger, you know, stuff like that. It was a really cool thing, it was really fashionable to be vegan. And it's strange because that is completely changed now. Like, I don't know about you guys, but I feel like that the culture's completely shifted now. Now everyone's very into kind of eating like a lot of red meat and you know, gut health, that had a bit of a thing as well, you know. It's weird how it happens like that, isn't it? Like there is kind of things go in phases, you know. But I just thought I'd talk about this phase at the time because I remember it happening, and the truth is, for a long time, around the kind of similar time, I was really sort of caught up by this sort of movement, and I was vegetarian for a while, and I was very close to being vegan. Like, I you know, I would have if I could make myself, basically. Like for a while I was very ideologically convinced that, like, okay, I slip up and I eat a bit of you know, a few eggs or drink a bit of milk, but ideally I should just never eat animal products. And it's completely different to how I feel now. And I just wanna tell my experience because, like, I look back on it and I think this is such like a horrible. There's such bad beliefs that I had about it, and it just really like affected my life. So I started drifting towards vegetarianism when I was in sixth form. So I remember I was very concerned about climate change and stuff like that. And one thing that people were always saying at the time was like, oh, meat is the biggest cause of climate change. You know, the single best thing you can do to stop climate change is eat less meat. And, you know, at the time, obviously, I was going home and all my family ate meat. So I would, you know, I would eat meat then. But at school, I started just getting the vegetarian option. And very quickly, it sort of became that I'd always get the vegetarian option. And I started feeling good about it, you know. I was like, what a great way to sort of contribute to help out to sort of reduce global emissions and stuff like that. And to be honest, I didn't really miss the taste of meat in these situations. I felt all the better for having something non-meat based. And yeah, it was really nice. And so I did this for quite a long while, and you know, I began to, as time went on, become more and more sort of serious about that, and I sort of had conversations with my parents and stuff about it, and I was like, yeah, you know, we should eat less meat because, you know, it's bad for the environment and stuff like that. And my parents were quite interested in it as well. You know, we started eating, just doing vegetarian versions of certain foods. So, you know, lentil bolognese, you know, stuff like that. And yeah, there was kind of a general feeling at the time that, like, yeah, meat is, you know, don't eat too much of it. Like, it's bad for your health. It's bad for bad for the planet as well. And then I moved to university, and at university I decided, like, you know what, my parents aren't cooking me food anymore. I've got to fend for myself. Let's just go all out and just try being completely vegan. And I tried it for like a day, and I was like, this is too much. But I was like, okay, I'll just be a vegetarian. And so for the next year, I was just a vegetarian, basically. But it's kind of weird because I feel like I was a new type of vegetarian that came along. I feel like before this sort of cultural shift where people were starting to worry about meat because of climate change, the only reason that people were vegetarians was for ethical reasons. And this put me in an interesting dilemma because in a sense, I wasn't against eating meat per se. I was only against eating meat because it affected like global emissions. And I feel like a lot of people in this kind of university culture were these kind of new vegetarians who were not refusing to eat meat out of ethical reasons, but just for sort of climate change reasons. And so that put me in a weird conundrum that I often struggle with. Like, what do I do if like someone offers me some foods that's otherwise going to go to waste, that is meat? Or if someone cooks me a meal, in a sense, should I just take the L on the greenhouse emissions for that time and just eat it? It certainly feels like less of a bigger deal than opposing eating meat because of greenhouse emissions. It always felt like there was a little bit more wriggle room than eating meat because of ethical reasons. I did meet people at university who were, in a sense, one of these ethical vegetarians. Like, they was not eat meat because it was against their religion, or they just felt strongly that they didn't want to kill an animal to get food. And they were always very confused by like my take on it. They were like, why? But if you're a vegetarian, like, surely you just never eat meat. And it was weird because I did feel like I was living my life very differently. I was not eating meat, like I was making lifestyle changes, but I still felt like there were sort of exceptions. And it was really troubling because I didn't know if this meant I could call myself a vegetarian, and it got me in all kinds of, I thought lots of weird things about it. But as the year went on, I began to become more convinced about not eating meat for ethical reasons. I got quite interested in a guy called Earthling Ed, who is very big in the sort of vegan community, especially here in the UK. And his take on meat was like, yep, it's bad for the environment, yep, it's bad for your health, but most of all, it's bad because of the animals. Fundamentally, that's the reason why we shouldn't be eating meat. And this guy, like, honestly, like, I disagree with his views, but he was incredibly good. He's a really good orator, and he would do sort of discussions, debates with people, and he just performed really well. He was, absolutely at the top of his game. And he really convinced me about not eating meat for ethical reasons. And the truth is, like, the factory farming industry is really bad, and I do think there is an ethical problem there that we should address. And at the time, it was really convincing to me, and I began to just really, this sort of aversion to eating meat just sort of set in, and I just began to feel really strongly that, like, I've just got to never eat meat ever again. So, how were my levels of focus in this period of my life? I look back on this time of my life and I just think it was such a shit part of my life as regards like my health, because all I would eat was basically pasta and lentils and stuff like that. And vegetarians often say, oh, you got to learn to cook in a healthy way and stuff like that. But fundamentally, whatever I was eating, it was never very nutrient dense. And I just always had this kind of brain fog going about my day. And I was always kind of feeling like I wasn't quite full, because of the stuff you can eat as a vegetarian, I was just ending up eating, like I say, a lot of kind of pulses, a lot of rice, a lot of vegetables, a lot of carbs, and I just never really felt full. I always felt like I wanted a little bit more to eat. and it's a really nasty feeling to have. You know, in a sense, like, oh, I'm grateful I can feed myself at all, you know, whatever, I've got that to be grateful for. But I always felt like, oh yeah, I had this weird sensation of like being full, like physically full, but not satiated. But I was so convinced about not eating meat for all these reasons that I just was like, oh, I've just got to firm it. Like, I just can't eat meat. And I remember getting into the second year of uni, and I don't really know why, but I decided I'm gonna start eating fish, just because I thought like I've got to do something about this sort of grogginess and this brain fog that I was feeling from not eating any protein. And so I started eating sort of tuna and stuff like that. And I felt like that was quite good because it met a lot of the requirements of things that I wanted from eating meat. But even though obviously there were problems with tuna fish farming and stuff like that, it seemed less cruel than factory farming, you know. And, you know, fish seemed sort of less sentient and stuff like that. So I thought, you know what, sort of meet me halfway, I'll just eat fish. But, and honestly, the difference this had on my mental sharpness was unbelievable. Like, even though I was still just eating loads of carbs and loads of just, you know, not very good food, just that little bit of protein or whatever it was in the tuna, I just suddenly felt so much sharper. Suddenly I could just think clearer. I just felt more awake. But it's funny because even though in a sense like, oh, I could eat fish now, like I'm fine, I still sort of started to want more. You know, I started feeling like tuna's good, but it wasn't that nutrient dense. You know, you look into like the breakdowns of a lot of these foods, and tuna is just protein. Like, that's kind of the only good thing it seems to have, apart from like some fatty acids and stuff. But, you know, my body started saying like, this tuna, you know, I sort of felt inside, I was like, this tuna stuff's great, mate, but like, what about some chicken? What about some meat? You know, and I sort of started to realise that a lot of this stuff that vegans were saying about the health, you know, I was very convinced by it on an intellectual level. You know, I found that I couldn't really argue with a lot of the things that the vegans were saying. You know, one thing that a lot of these vegan influencers like Earthling Ed was saying was like the protein. Like, you could get enough protein from plants as long as you ate like a balanced diet, you know, and you got foods from different sources. And there's this thing called like protein matching, where, because, you know, protein, like, there are lots of different sort of things that are called protein, and so, like, you'd have beans that have some forms of protein and rice that has some forms of other protein, and the thing to do was to just eat like lots of different foods so you got enough different types of protein. And I was convinced by that. I was like, yeah, I don't have the knowledge about diet to disprove that, you know. It intellectually made sense that, like, yeah, we didn't need to eat animals, and like they'd sort of talk about the fossil record and stuff, and like, you know, early humans would not eat meat apparently, you know, they just eat sort of insects and stuff like that. And I was like, yeah, to be fair, I can't disprove it, you know, that sounds very true. But the fact still remains that even though there was all this intellectual like stuff saying like, oh no, eating meat is not healthy, I just got this gut feeling that like it was wrong. I felt intuitively that I should be eating meat, and it made sense to eat meat. And gradually, like, I started to look into the science behind it a bit more, and, you know, at this time I started getting more into Jordan Peterson and stuff like that, and obviously his diet. And I started thinking like, all this stuff about plant-based diet being healthy, like, it's not true. Like, it just doesn't. It's very easy to make something look convincing if you present it to someone who doesn't know anything about the subject. Like, I remember watching a video by Earthling Ed about omega-3s in fish, and he was saying like, oh no, you don't need fish to get omega-3s, which is like kind of fatty acids that are like good for your brain. and he did this whole video about it. And I remember the first time I watched it, I was like, wow, this guy knows his stuff. Like, I definitely don't need to eat fish to get omega-3s. But I remember starting to look into this stuff more and more, and I got another, I looked at it like a second time. I had another look at this video, and having watched it again, I was like, actually, there are some holes in this argument that I didn't see before. There's some stuff that he's not accounted for, because I knew a bit more about the context and stuff. And I just realised, like, you can't rely too much on, this sounds so weird to say, but like, you can't rely too much on science to make the case for what you do. Science is useful and we should rely on it to an extent, but fundamentally, you've got to rely on something deeper within you, this kind of gut instinct. And yeah, that's what I realised, is like, I can't disprove that eating meat is unhealthy, like being vegan is perfectly healthy. But I still just don't feel like it's true in my body. My body feels unhealthy eating this kind of diet. I remember one day, I think I was going home from a night out, and I was a bit drunk, and I was on my own at this point, and I just walked past a McDonald's, and I thought, you know what, let's just give it a try. And I went into this McDonald's, I just bought like a Big Mac, and I just sat there in my hands, and I just ate it. And that was the first time I'd eaten like some red meat in a long while. And it's funny because, you know, McDonald's is obviously really unhealthy, all those carbs, you know, refined carbs, you know, whatever. And I'm sure the meat's of horrendous quality and, you know, produced in really, you know, unethical conditions. But I ate it, and just that little bit of meat, my body just said yes to. It was like, finally, you're listening to us. Like, more of that, please. That's what I felt like it said to me. Like, more of that, please, and without the carbs. Stop eating the carbs. And, you know, I had that experience, and I went back to normal life, and I just kept eating like vegetarian food with a bit of fish here and there. And to be honest, I was stuck in this, in a real moral quandary now, because I'd seen like how bad the conditions in which animals were raised, like from all this vegan content that I was watching. But at the same time, I just realised that they were wrong about health. Like, it just didn't feel healthy to be eating this diet anymore. And yeah, I was very confused about it. I remember getting to third year, and, you know, I look back on second year, and I had a lot of quite negative experiences, which, you know, maybe we'll go into another video, but I came into third year thinking like I really wanted to sort my life out. You know, I felt like in second year I'd just become a bit of a loser, you know, and I was just drinking too much, and I was just not really going anywhere with my life. I wasn't really happy with who I am, and I hit the ground running in third year with quite a positive mindset, quite a sort of self-improvement focused mindset. And I decided, like, I had to, if I was going to really improve my life, I had to really go all out on it. And I decided that one aspect I had to do this in was in my diet. I just had to eat a diet that was genuinely healthy to me. And that meant eating meat. And this is really difficult for me because I was so, you know, I felt so strongly that I was ethically opposed to like factory farming and stuff like that. And, you know, I remember being in Lidl the first time doing a shop and sitting there in like the meat aisle, and I think I bought some steak. I remember just saying to myself, like, you know, I wasn't really very religiously minded, you know, particularly at the time, but I just, you know, I've always thought that there's sort of a higher power, and I just remember thinking, like, there was a moment where I just took the steak out of the fridge and I just said to God, I was like, look, God, I know this is really unethical, like the conditions in which this has been raised, but I've decided you put me here on earth with this potential. I want to live up to it. I want to become a better man. I don't want to be a loser anymore. and I have to start taking my health more seriously and just eating proper foods if I'm going to do that. So just forgive me, you know. I'm so conflicted about this. I'm doing what I can, but you know, if this really is wrong, if I'm sitting here, if I shouldn't be doing this, buying this steak, like knowing where it's come from, then just please forgive me. You know, obviously I didn't say it out loud like that, but yeah, that was the gist of it in my head. And after that moment, I never looked back. I was like, I just got a fuller version of what I felt when I started eating tuna again. You know, and it's just so nice to just focus on taking my diet seriously. And you know, it's kind of a side note, and it's not, in a sense, it's not really important, but it was just so nice to be able to like make food that was like tasted good and made me feel good again. And you know, my focus was better, and I started getting into the gym properly, and you know, I was able to diet, like take it seriously. Because I remember I'd been into the gym, like into calisthenics and stuff like that, when I was younger, like when I was in university in like first year. But I just couldn't really take it seriously because I just couldn't get enough protein in, and I just wouldn't compromise myself on that. Like, I wouldn't allow myself to eat meat because of it, and so I was just constantly trying to eat like tofu and stuff like that, to try and bulk up. But it just didn't work, and that really held me back with, you know, the gym. And I could have had like a really good gym life in first year if I'd been more willing to take my diet seriously. You know, I don't know really, but it seems reasonable to assume that. I do think it was a big sort of stopping block for me, my diet. But now I was like, yeah, I can just eat as much protein food as I like, and you know, it's not a problem. And you know, like I say, there is an unresolved problem of the ethics of factory farming and stuff like that. My perspective with it is, you want to be able to make, basically, the aim is just get yourself to a position where you're earning enough money to buy like high quality meat where the animals are raised in a better condition. That's kind of my aim at the moment. It's like, yeah, until that point, have a diet that supports your mental capacity so you can get there as soon as possible. You can say it's cope, whatever, but I just think humans need to be healthy. They need to be sharp. They need to eat a diet that is generally healthy for them. And I just believe you need to eat meat to do that. So that's kind of how I resolved it in my own mind. And just go back to the current day, like obviously this kind of vegan trend has disappeared now to a large extent, I believe. And people are more into kind of eating red meat, and there's kind of, you know, like Eddie Abu, people like that. There's a real culture for just eating like no carbs, just meat and stuff like that. And, you know, these guys, they present very good science behind it and stuff like that. And I do follow a lot of this stuff, and I find it really interesting, and I'm inspired to do it. But fundamentally, I still recognise that the science these guys produce is flaws, you know, and you've got to rely on what your body says to move forwards, basically. And that's much more important. You know, at the moment, I'm experimenting with this kind of thing of not eating very much carbs, just eating meat and stuff like that. And I'm inspired by people like Eddie Abu and people like that who have really recommended me to do it. But I am listening to my body all the while I'm doing it. And this is really the message I want to get away, is I'm not accepting this stuff blindly anymore. You know, I'm seeing how it feels to eat, you know, just meat. And, you know, everyone says, oh, it's the diet you should have at the moment. But I don't know. You know, I'm going to try it for a bit and see how it feels. If my body doesn't respond well to it, I'm going to experiment with something else. You know, I just think this is how we should be doing it. And yeah, I'm just glad I'm in a good place with diet at the moment. I'm glad I feel like I'm worthy enough as a person to like be able to experiment with it, and just really make the most of the opportunity I have of being alive and being able to make the most of it. So yeah, thanks for watching, guys. Hope you found this interesting. If you click the top link in the description, that will take you to a free consultation call with me, where I'm doing some online coaching at the moment. We'd love to get you involved. So yeah, join us. It'd be great to hear from you. But otherwise, see you in the next one.